Just wait for Katrine. Do you need to do a sound check?
Are we live?
Yeah?
Are we live on?
Yeah. How's your back been?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. A bit achy, but I did an hour's hard garden yesterday, and that's about my limit with my belt on, because I was planting weeks like this, and that was almost like getting the signals like that's enough.
Do you ever think of putting one foot forward?
That takes, yeah. What I normally do is I try to work like this, and that's my support.
Yeah.
But doing that,
And
obviously, is
and one foot forward doesn't.
It's not comfortable.
No, that's true.
It's not comfortable. But it's actually quite clever. It supports. I could do that with a cushion.
You could do like 20 minutes without a belt, and then put it on. You should always do a bit without. Because your body is learning and you behave with the belt because you support it.
Yes.
So you could do
without the belt, I can literally go out on that, and that's it.
Yeah.
I've got a week.
You can bring your phone, I will come get it.
Yeah, that's right. To roll my back.
Okay, so here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome again from Bonnevaux. We've started to have some guests from different parts of Europe, so everyone's busy cooking and ironing and who knows what else. But it's lovely to know that you're joining in again, and hope you've been finding these classes helpful. And I'd be curious to see as countries lighten up and we begin to have permission to move around, and especially if you're in the UK, I don't know when you all start going back to work or all of that. So it'd be interesting to see and to hear from you if it continues to be useful to have these kind of classes. I know lots of you do classes with all sorts of people, but I'm curious to know. And then just if you're just joining for the first time, I think this may be the 7th week that we've been coming together, and what I've been doing is just using the yoga poses as a way into what I find really interesting, which is the kind of grammar and the kind of vocabulary that is behind a conscious inquiry about a movement practice for you. It doesn't need to be all shushy and sophisticated. It just is like that. Either we have a practice that we do as a kind of ritual, which can be wonderful, or at other times where we're kind of investigating what's behind. So in yoga, we have dog poses and all sorts of things. And sometimes with a little bit of grammar and vocabulary, a light can be shone on why you do that thing or why that thing actually bothers you from time to time, things of that nature. And then that opens up your practice to explore. And I think this applies to all the kinds of movements we do, from jogging to yoga to mountain climbing to carrot chopping. So, and so we've been spending time with how it is that we can tune into our own sense of weight, and how easy it is that we don't go there, that we go into the idea, and the idea is always linked to vision and language. And so before we know it, we're looking at ourselves. This culture of mobile phones and selfies and YouTube and Zooms is not necessarily so helpful. And so then we don't realize how much we are actually moving and looking at self. And really our bodies long for something else, our whole selves do, which is just to be in the garden, just to be in the sun, just to be under the tree, just to be with bones and relaxing or tense or making it to the top of the hill or falling asleep. So definitely not so much looking at, but more what I've been calling practicing nearness. And weight is one of the big proprioceptive, self-perceptive tools that we've had since we were tiny, for just being on the ground, just being in gravity. So we started with that, and I think it's great to start with that because we forget because we're like that, we accelerate. And then breath weight and being on the ground quickly opens the gate into the garden and lets us know if we're feeling safe. If we can be here, if you can't be here, it might be better to go for a jog or climb a mountain or bake some bread or do jiu-jitsu. But if we can be here and touch in, then we start to notice the breath and we start to notice places that are resourceful and resilient in the body. And of course, our practice opens up. So the weight, and then learning through safety to notice the breath rather than do the breath. And that's opened us into some of the basic grammars that I've been proposing. One is that we have an axial system. All of us feel that we get upright and we have a spine. And the axial system or spine or pole or tent pole, whatever you want to call it, what works with the river in the middle of your country, I've been saying, that when that is there, then we notice, oh, and I have a periphery. Or I'm in the periphery and, oh, that helps me feel where the central river is. And it's very different if you walk in the world with your periphery, or you talk to someone with your periphery, or you're trying to tell someone to stop from the periphery of your body, or if you're in your axis and you're moving through the city or the woods, or you're telling someone to stop from your axis. And they both can be valuable, but sometimes we don't realize that we're always more in one or the other. So we've been playing with axis and periphery, and that's helped us to start to look at front bending and back bending. Essentially, we've been doing a little bit of rotation, but we've been front bending and back bending. In sitting, we've done some classes in sitting, in kneeling, in standing, and today we're going to do it in levitation. Next week, bilocation. Actually, next week, there won't be a class. Because I'll be bilocating and I'm not sure I'll be able to get that. So the next 2 Tuesdays, there won't be a class. But if you get the mailing through the meditation community or the MailChimp through me, will alert you to that the class, then we'll pick up again after the 2-week break. So let's come to our mats. Last time we worked a lot in line on our backs, and we went in through the arms and we looked at the rib cage and the movement of the heart. So we'll pick up on that a little bit, but I want to come back to the very, very, very first thing that we did. And we began on our hands and knees. So if you're on your hands and knees, I mean, if you stick with the metaphors I've been using, or the kind of cartography of mapping that I've been using, you could say, oh, I'm on my periphery. My hand is far away, radial to my body. So I'm on my hands, I'm on my knees, I feel my toenails on the floor. So this is my periphery. And off the floor, up in my torso, I have my me. Very often we put our fingers on our axis, my me or my axis or my central river. So just open up to that. I'm on my hands and knees, which are peripheral to the center of my body, which could be my spine or my axis, or, if you don't want to be anatomical, it could be a tofu sausage or a sausage, depending on your eating habits. So it's just up to you. Feel that you're leaning onto the periphery, your weight is there, and then slowly just begin to let your trunk, your spine, your axis, your center line, your midline, any one of those things, your head to tail, just let it begin to float around. And just relax into this proposition if it works for you. Way out there at the edges of my country, I'm touching the ground. And then up here, I have a torso or a trunk or a spine. And then we can just let things float around. Everything can go to the left or the right, or tail and head can oppose. And it's just doodling, just wasting time, not being linear. And of course, by doing this, we're pouring our weight into our hands and knees. And just letting that happen. You can make the movement get bigger, and don't censor, don't censor anything. Yeah, you could come all the way back. You could go kind of much more forward. Yeah. You might be practicing with your dog or your friend, and so you see, and then you push away. Yeah. 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 So there's hundreds of yoga poses in here. Way back here, we've got child pose. And way up here, we've got cobra pose. And in the middle, we've got nowhere pose. And then cat pose. So here we go. So often, cat pose seems to be something about stretching the spine out, dropping the spine down. So if you just do that, if you pull your spine up, drop your spine down and arch and flex. So you'll notice that it's the muscles along the axis that are making you move. And you can get very kind of sprinty and punchy. African dance, you can squeeze up and squeeze back. Yeah. So this is like the center squeezing the center. Just do a little bit more. Yeah. If I squeeze my belly and my buttocks, I go up. If I squeeze my back muscles and my neck muscles, I arch the other way. Yeah, and it has a punchy quality to it, because we do have muscles that work in this punchy way. Come back to the middle, just float around again and just let go of that. Now, yeah, let's do it differently. That was wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. That kind of punchy, sprinty, calisthenic movement is wonderful, wonderful. It's muscles pulling things towards each other. But now, if instead you start to let your tail grow, so just relax your bum. Yeah. And let your tail emerge as your bottom thaws and relaxes and your squirrel's tail grows. And just opening an imaginary process allows you to notice that you are immediately in a perceptual process. There's no lag and there's no separation. That's why we can have poetry and art and dance and be spectators or be in it, or because immediately we imagine and perceive. So I have a tail, my tail is getting longer, and immediately my spinal tone is changing and getting longer. So my tail. And then I have head bones and antlers going the other way. So now I'm letting my antlers grow and my tail grow. And as they grow long and huge, and they have their own support system in the space, because my antlers are also feelers and noses like a snail's. What are those things that snails have called?
Shell? God.
Feelers. No. Antenna. So your antlers are also antennae. And your tail is also a nose, and it has an eye on the end. So it's sensorial. So they are going out into the space and being supported by it. And then you just let your spine hang. So of course you're going to do a back bend, but without squeezing all the muscles. I hope that makes sense, right? So I'm not squeezing, I'm just letting my antlers grow, letting my tail grow. And as they grow into the space and the sky, and it's delicious, my spine hangs. And now I start to bring my tail down. I bring my tail down, and I bring my antlers down. And I notice that my skin is being lifted by the blue sky, and eagles or gnats, or air is lifting up against your belly. So now we're doing a flexion, but we're not using the muscles, the punchy muscles like we did before. So it's the same body, same person, same muscles, but the movement is different. Because now we are orienting, and so instead of muscles pulling punchily towards each other, we're actually lengthening. And we need both. We need to be able to lengthen and shorten. And we come back to the middle. And the tail goes up. And the antlers go up. So it could be cat pose, or I don't know what you would call this, but it's less like a cat in its muscles and more like a river being drawn to the ocean. And just, you could move your arms, or you could adjust something as your tail and head go up, so that the extension of the spine becomes bigger. But don't force any muscles, just increase the delight of the orientation. And then we go the other way. The antlers become huge. I'm in the presence of the awe of the forest, and I'm bowing, and the tail comes down. And so the spine changes direction. Yeah. And here we are with weight. As I orient the head and tail, I allow the spine to be heavy, heavy, heavy. Each vertebra articulating in relation to its nearest friend. Each disc coming alive. And then we notice that we could put our attention on the belly button and the belly wall. So the belly button and the belly wall let go. Just notice how much you could let go on that front layer. And then the organs inside, which are considerably heavy, let go. The liver, the spleen, the stomach, the small intestine, the colon. All of that webbing that ties the small intestine to the lower lumbar spine. And then all of that beautiful lining that goes all around like a duvet, the mesentery, all around the organs. And then all those layers that cover the bag hanging. And then the vertebrae are hanging and resting on top of the organs, and friends of the organs. The organs are the oldest sister and brother to the vertebra. The bones showed up later. And then there's all those layers of muscle and tissue of the back, also very heavy. We have the long muscles that go up the spine, and all the short little diagonal ones underneath them. And then the big steaks on top, and the fat and the skin. And if you move your arms around a bit and you let your antlers and tail move, every time we make a slight sideway movement, we evoke little beginnings of rotations in the spine, and organs hang. Sometimes you can actually feel like a clear, wiry line from the hanging organ river to the hanging spine. And the mouth is heavy. The mouth is also the organy part of the head. The tongue is heavy. The teeth are heavy. And you are beginning to drool. It's dripping to the floor. Soft in the armpits. Bend the arms a little. And then the antlers, the vertebra outside of your head, your antlers begin to come down, just the antlers. And you notice a different direction of spine and a different tilt of cranium, head to those top vertebrae, just a different tilt, a different feeling in those bony friends and the soft tissue all around. And then, of course, the upper rib spine starts to move and the tail starts to come down. And you're making a flexion without doing it, without squeezing your tummy muscles. You could, but you don't. And let's add a gentle push up from the hands. Don't tighten. Just let a fountain turn on in your arms, and it's pushing up through the shoulder blades, let's say, and the clavicles and the breastbone, and it's pushing those vertebrae up. And the more you push up, the more you hang your throat through. And the belly wall is being pushed up by the knees as well as the head. And the tail is dropping. Is there another bit of dropping in the tail that you can find? And then you come back and just see where you are and let yourself float around, float around, float around. If your wrists are tired, we'll come off in a moment, but you can go down to your elbows. Just floating. And then we're just going to slowly ease back, the bottom going back towards the heels. You're going to fold forward and do what's most comfortable. Knees further apart or closer together. Forehead could be resting on your hands. Lots of room to the elbows. Try not to be propping yourself up. So if you have a back injury, the lower back, so from the last ribs down into the lowest part of your spine, it could feel like, sorry, I was a bit away from the mic. It could feel like almost like where your spine, pelvis, legs are. If you have an injury there or it feels wonky, sometimes releasing into the front and passive front bend is worrying, frightening, or just doesn't feel possible. So don't force it. Don't force it. Just remember if this is something that you should be able to rest on. Yeah. On the contrary, the neck injuries, often with a bit of support to the head, can be eased in this position, whereas a back bend might exacerbate them a bit. So just resting. Let go into your arms and out through your fingers. Let go into your legs and out through the knees or toes. Okay. So if you're kind of very soft and folded over, and you begin to walk forward with your one arm at a time. So, and then you creep forward again with your fingers and another, however you want to do it. There is a moment where you reach the end of your arm length. And very often on your way there, your breastbone has been moving and the torso gets longer, and then you kind of reach the limit. And the only way to keep going is to go bottoms up. So you kind of tilt forward a bit more, and and then your spine gets free to move again, and you can inch forward with your arms. And at a certain moment, you realize, okay, wow, my bum is really going up, and my feet could begin to start coming off the ground. So that's fine, you could stay there, be more passive, or you could turn your toes under and hook your feet into the ground. So either is fine, but I'm going to do the hooking. And the bum comes up, and you want to continue on that path
and stop before your upper leg becomes vertical. Don't pass the vertical. So we started these 7 weeks of yoga looking at the relationship of these things, what we just did in the cat pose, with the spine hanging and lifting, but having a head and tail, and you could move from the center, or you could let the periphery move you, or the world move you. And then we looked at the relationship of this pose to child pose. And this is an incredibly safe, efficacious pose to be in for the re-education and the healing of your sacrum lumbar world, which most of us have a bit of problems with because we're all soft as we fall into the World Wide Web. So this position allows you to hang through and allows each of those vertebrae in the lower spine to hang in the right direction off the sacrum. And it lets all those discs breathe and move. When they don't move, they start to become fibrotic and hard. And you know, that's often how we get these little injuries and worries. So it lets all of that happen. If you've done lots of yoga and you've been told not to let your ribs hang, I just would ignore that for now and just hang. Just let your spine hang. If you're like me, or even more, and you're very, very bendy in this direction and it feels too much, you can put a couple of cushions under your chest. So you'll know if things are pinching or straining. But notice that as you rest here and you let your tail go up, something begins to happen in the floor of the pelvis. You'll notice that as you let your tail come out of the jungle of your bottom and it goes up, you can begin to distinguish, and you can even go around there with your fingers and touch, that tail is not sit bones. And in this position, with the legs bent and the tail going up, the sit bones are eased away from each other. And some of us are unable to do that. You know, and it's really one of the major problems of why we're not advancing on world peace, because we're tight-assed. And it's just a problem. It's a problem, and you can't will your bottom to soften. You got to get in this position and let the sit bones ease away from each other. Big or small, it doesn't matter. But sitting crumpled forward causes the opposite to happen, causes you to really harden in the back of the pelvic floor, and then you get up, and then you think it's your hamstrings only. But this is the deepest part of the system, and it has a profound impact on the upper body, how we reach through the arms, how we behave into our faces, and so on. So just letting that happen, letting the sit bones shine away from each other, and your tail, victorious, comes out and waves over the battlefield, and everything's well. Now you have a huge tail, and you're forward, and you can feel, and actually, if you press your toes in, you can begin to play with a connection, toe to sit bone, toe to pelvic floor, because it's there. It's the body's always using that connection. Toe, tissue under the toes to pelvic floor, tissue of the pelvic floor. We use that when we walk. So you can press your right toes and feel your right or left sit bone, left toes, like we're going for some kind of remarkable walk. Walk, walk. Width and space, tail. Now we're going to push with the toes, and we're going to start to come forward because we push with the toes, not because you squeeze your pelvic floor and your belly. You stay open, you push with the toes, tail is brandished, and you come forward. Yeah, you have to smile, otherwise it's terrifying. You come forward, you come through with your toes, and your antlers come up, and you don't need to squeeze the tail. You can. If we just squeeze for a moment, squeeze, you hear my voice changes.
And then release, but stay connected through the toes. And then we push with the hands. We don't need to tighten around the breastbone and clavicles and throat. And we go back, and we go all the way back. If it bothers your shoulders to be here, move your heads wider, or if it's one shoulder that's bothered or injured, just tuck it under you so you don't want to irritate. And then we push from the toes and we start to come through, we start to come through, and we start to come up. And then here, you can decide to just hang through like a hammock, and it's perfectly fine if it doesn't bother you. When I was younger, I think my lower back was more curvy, and it felt pinchy, but I don't have, so that's all fine. Or, which I want you to explore, is you can use your toes, by waking up your toes, you can decide to be less hammock and a little more bamboo-y. So you can decide, it doesn't mean flexing, it just means waking up support systems around the belly. And also, if you orient your antlers up into the sky and open your throat, that will also support you. And now we're just going to accelerate back. And accelerate forward and make a ha sound. And ha as you go back. And ha as you come forward. And ha back. And as you come forward. And now reach with your right heel, so your right knee comes off the floor. Yeah, asymmetrical. Now put it down and reach with your left heel, open across the chest into the face, and the knee comes down. And reach with both heels. Really make it the heels. Don't do it somewhere else. Yeah. And if you count aloud or recite poetry or sing, you'll notice that your voice shouldn't change at all. But very long. Okay, we're going to push back. We're going to push the heels back. Stay up. And now we're going to come forward on the toes, almost the tips of the toes. Forward. And now we're going to push. Don't sag so much. Long. And we're going to come forward. And now, this is for Jane Fonda. Stay, don't sag so much. You could stay longer and longer. Now we're just going to bend the knees a little, just a little, and let your tail go up. Let your tail go up. And this is the majesty of squirrel with its tail up and its head down. Huge living toes. So I just moved my feet just to be in a better place for me. And really bend your toes. And then feel you're not putting your heels on the floor. You're doing squirrel wearing Prada, high heels, and you're putting yourself on the ball of the big toe and on the ball of the thumb and first finger, the mouth of the hand. Yeah. So your little toe is participating, and the outer heel of your hand is participating, but you feel your big toe and your thumb and first finger. And you're going up, you keep floating up. You're not getting rigid. It's just that new bits of your spine open up. And as you go up, you could be a bit also like an ascending water dragon coming up from the bottom of the ocean. A little bit of a watery, wavy movement on your spine, or maybe somebody got hold of your tail and is gently waving you in the wind. It's silk, waving, heavy, waving. Keep going. Keep letting the balls of the toes go down. You will notice at a certain moment your spine, as it gets longer, your belly naturally comes in, but you don't need to do that. You don't need to stabilize.
we never were meant to stabilize because we thought I should stabilize. We stabilize because the world is so amazing and we're here. We collapse when we're shocked, overwhelmed, but we're stable before a lover or a delicious plate of parmigiana di melanzane or a beautiful tree. You know, we're stable. We're rooting and winging. Beautiful, beautiful. And then you come down. You come down and just fold back into child pose. Let's just come back to the weight and how that works for you. Weight is just a word. It's just a word, and we may have a perceptual thing about it, and we may have content about it. So it could be water, it could be mass, it could be thickness. Yeah, just heaviness, heaviness, heaviness. We have memories of pure embodied contentment, that moment leaning your back against a sunny wall, etc. So we can allow that to arise as we let ourselves be in the weight, not anything anatomical even. In the weight, on the ground, with the ground, being ground. And then, so if the next thing, if this was enough, being folded over, while we do the next thing, you could lie down on your back if you've had enough. But otherwise, we're just going to let the arms come around the side and reach back towards your feet. You can do this fast or slowly. Yeah. Yeah, that's strong. Yeah, so I'm just going to see about your feet, okay? Just release. Is that okay? Wow. Okay, and this one? Okay, how's that? They're just releasing your feet. And if I put my hand here, it's okay? Okay. So the arms are going back. This is very different from having the arms forward, and you may love or not being here. And if it's uncomfortable, don't stay. But it's a completely different direction for the shoulder blades. Yeah. And it's a completely different way that your spine hangs off to the floor through your head. Now, don't make any big change, but if you've tipped really far forward and you feel like you've lost your bum to feet relationship, just see, you feel what I did, right? It's changed. Just see, like with John here, I just relaxed the feet, and I can't touch you, obviously, but you can imagine and play with just what do I need to do just to check that my bum can drop a little more towards my feet. And then you're going to reach around and hold on to each heel. Only do this if it feels right. If you've had enough of bending forward, just stand back and we'll continue in a moment. But you're going to reach around and hold on to your heels. You feel, see how this drops? Feel that? And then, so when you're holding the heels, just take a moment to touch, to be in touch. Just holding the heels. And then your arms will do the work, and you're going to gently pull in. So
you're pulling your forehead towards your knees and you're curving. So if your lower back and or neck worry you, be gentle or just don't do this. You're gonna, that's it. And you're not making any squeezy movements in any muscles along your torso. But you're bringing your forehead in. Yeah. And it brings your tail in, so it really curves you like a little rabbit. And then as you get to the limit of the movement, you can kind of begin to squeeze. I would start with the breathing muscle in the middle of your torso. Imagine that you just suck it in, and then suck in your pelvic floor, suck in just behind your clavicles, and the floor of your mouth, and the roof of the mouth. Just pull in an anemone, pulling in, pulling in, pulling in. So in yoga, these are the bandhas, but in our contemporary terms, we might call them all the different diaphragms, these horizontal, very intelligent, resilient structures that negotiate often the change of curvature in the spine. You just pull them all in, pull them all in, pull them all in. And then when you want to, you're going to let go and you're going to let the spine begin to ooze forward. And then you can begin to bring your arms forward so you go back to that position we were in before. And doesn't need to be symmetrical. You can do one arm, then the other. Yeah. And it's a release of weight from a contracting effort to a release of weight that allows the spine to come forward. That's it. And then just hang out and notice your breath. And notice how things have moved. So, just before we finish, just check that if you're propping yourself up, that you're aware and whether you want to stay there. So John, if you just let your arms go, are you comfortable? So just let your arms go a bit more forward, and it's going to change the way that you're resting. Yeah, instead of the arms pushing back, you can rest away from your spine, out through the periphery. And the forehead is allowed to rest on the floor if it touches the floor. Okay. And then come undone and lie on your backs. And we'll look at a very similar thing from another direction. So you're lying on your back. Your legs are bent. And decide where you want to put them. And just let yourself be on the floor. And just for a moment, just to become aware of what kind of folding may be going on in the legs. Just let your legs move towards and away from each other. Just very easy. Just easy. Feel how that moves over the foot. Let the head wobble. Notice what you're doing in the arms and shoulders. Okay, so big toes coming out of your feet, big heels. Let's put the arms wide, palms up. Okay. Now, you're going to, just for comparison, you're going to harden your back, your lower back, and harden your belly, and just pick it all up. Pick it up. Pick it up, and put it back down. So just harden and lift. Just do it again. So that's that first kind of cat pose we did. You can harden all around and just lift the whole thing up. And we could do this in a punchy way. We could do 5 or 20. We're going to do 60 of these. So, no, we're not. Okay. So, and that's beautiful. That's what you would do if you were going to, have to push something really hard or etc. Now, very same part of the body, same muscles. We're going to let it all come up because the tail is already going, the tail is already coming out of your bum, it's already tilting your spine, your feet are reacting and reaching, meeting the ground, working the ground. Your knees are going with your tail, and your spine has rolled up, same muscles, different feel to the movement, different movement of the weight. In the previous one, it's not sustainable because we can't breathe and we're no longer in our weight, we're sprinting. Here, we're doing long distance running. We can still be aware of parts and the voice doesn't need to change. And go as high as you like up the spine because your tail is just flying and you're rolling up through the shoulders, rolling up right up behind the tongue. Soft in the arms. You might just lift your arms a little and drop them to the floor. Lift a little, soften in the elbows and drop them to the floor. Huge fingers. And then we're going to come down. We're just going to roll down. Tail suspended being the last thing that drops down. The last thing that drops. Feel your weight. Perceive what's changing. Notice. Very often I'm more in my toes than in my heels. So now I feel my heels. I feel my heels. And I'm aware of the kind of worky stuff that I do in the front of my thighs. For you, it might be somewhere else. So just aware. Okay, let your arms come a little bit up in the direction of your head. If this is an issue for your shoulders, lift your arms up a bit. You don't want to be straining, so you can put a cushion under each arm. Don't proceed around with the arms if the shoulder complains. It's not helpful. It means that the shoulder articulation is not managing to do its thing, which is kind of miraculous. Because all the bones around that thing we call a shoulder, the bone of the upper arm, the clavicle, the shoulder blade, etc., all the tissue, they create a kind of space that lets the shoulder blade and the big round bony head of the upper arm separate away from each other. It's beautiful. We don't think it, but we do it. But sometimes things feel crunchy and stuck because that movement isn't happening easily, so don't force. But anyway, eventually your arms are up, maybe resting on cushions. I still have a tail, I still have feet, but now my antlers are growing, my arms are growing, my face is open to the sky, to the world, and my head and my arms come up a bit. Just a bit. Just a tiny bit. Very wide, very open. If you're talking to yourself, which is a good thing, your voice won't have changed. And then put everything back. And the breath and the head and the antlers and the face. And breath is falling on your face. And you don't need to go far. But you're waking up the tissue of the front of your throat, where we do all this extraordinary stabilizing and lengthening of the neck. And then
Bump your head and arms down. You can bump your head a little bit on the floor. And again, fingers growing, arms, face, hair, eyelashes, nostrils, tongue, coming up, open. And then just wave a little from side to side. From side to side. Anyone watching you would think you were completely bonkers. But it's perfect, perfect, perfect. Imagine telling people, drop everything to the floor. At a dinner party, that this is an amazing thing that you learned how to do. Oh, the deadly silence at the dinner party. After you showed them this. And the relief of knowing you would never be invited again to another dinner party. It's just so perfect. Okay, now the tail is going. Spine is following the tail. Huge going up. And you're coming down. And as your tail comes down, your head and arms are going up. Going up. Dear Jane Fonda, you never taught this in your classes. It's so... Tail is going up. Tail taking the spine. Length all the way up. Huge toes, and then coming down. And as you come down, head and arms going up. Yeah, and don't do a sit-up. It's not a sit-up. It's coming through your face. You're just opening to the sky, to the rain, to the beloved, to piles of ice cream falling on your face, and drop back down. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. And then just roll around and come up to standing. Just go for a walk. For a walk, letting your legs swing and your arms. Yeah. Just feel where you are and then stop, maybe looking out the window. There's a robin. The wind, and then we walk again. It's the weight, that's what we do all the time as the human beings. We're in our weight, on our feet, and on our bones. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's come back to the mat. And we're gonna come up onto our knees like this. So if you need a cushion for your knees, you'll know it immediately, or you may already know it. So you can just put a little cushion, the edge of the cushion under your knees. Yeah. Okay, so just to find out where we are, this is a complex pose because you can feel that your body wants to do that. Even if you're very openly in the hips, there's still a force in there. It's because of that long structure that comes from the inside of the thighs and comes over the pelvis onto the spine, the psoas. So, and some of us are actually flexed all the time. It's such a deep response to life and all the things it's throwing at you. So take your fingers and you'll find the bony pelvis and come around the front. If you go down, you'll feel where your pubic bone is. And then if you go a little out to the side, you have the groins, and that's where the hip joint actually is. And just touch into that groiny place. It's a very powerful little triangular muscle also that can be, it's very short and it flexes us. So just touching into this place, which is amazing because it's so much part of stability and locomotion, but it has all these sophisticated things passing through to do with our genitals and going to the toilet and all this kind of stuff. So right here. And then we're just going to sit back. So you're going to feel the fold that you make. It's a fold, like an origami paper foldy thing. Fold, and if it's painful to go down to your heels, you don't need to. And then we're just going to lean forward and come up. So, and again, yeah. And often we don't do that. We don't lean forward, we flex. And then we come up through a flexion, and then it's too late because it's set in the cerebellum, and we're in our habit of flexing, and then we have to actively come undone. But so we're not going to flex, we're just going to let the tail stick out, like we did when we fell forward, knee forward, an arch, which again, because I continue to feel that to open in the sunlight, this one and this. Yeah. And don't judge, adore the belly, adore the hip. It's all okay. Yeah, just feeling across that I can open, or just putting the hands quietly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the reason we spent a moment with this is that now we're going to let the back arch, but if the hips don't open, then you do everything in the lumbars, okay? And the lumbars are already bending that way, so you don't need. So now, here we are, we're on our way. Now just let yourself be rooting into the knees. Your hands can give that direction down into the thighs. Down into the thighs, yeah. And now we're not just going to bend in the lumbars. As we go down into the knees, we're actually going to lift the torso. We're going to lift the torso, and that's what arms do all day long. They lift our torsos off our pelvis. So the arms, the arms lift you. And this is the central discovery that Vanda Scaravelli made in her yoga journeys. She realized that in her yoga work, the spine could make these two directions. It could root and it could lengthen on the wave of the breath. And that's what we're doing. Rooting down through the legs, letting the hip extension happen. And then the arms are lifting the spine. And as they lift the spine, the back bend should be climbing up your spine so that the ribs begin to articulate in that direction. The top thoracic vertebrae, around where your scapulas are, your shoulder blade. That's it. So, and then we can let the pelvis go forward and we can lean into those extending hips. And we don't, see if I do like this, I'm in my lumbars. And that's kind of as far as I can go. But if I lift up through the arms, I begin to do an amazing back bend. And this is where we were in the last class. It was a much more quiet class, but we were opening the arm to heart, let's say, arm to base of diaphragm. Opening it up. And also, if you throw your head back, that will limit you too, because you go into your neck curve. You want to keep orienting the antlers, and then we're just going to bring the hands to the head and come back down and do a semi-fold. Just fold up to with your elbows resting on your knees. Just a semi-fold. So, because it's a huge movement, you don't want to go too quickly in the opposite direction. So don't look at yourself, don't look at any of us. We're just going to make the movement again as a summary of the whole class, and you're just going to let it unfold easily. You're just going to reach up through the antlers, root the knees, let the arms float up. Don't lean into your lower back, just open. Surrender. Surrender the chest, the casing of the heart, the way the heart sits on the diaphragm. Don't squeeze the lower legs of the diaphragm and the lower back. Let your tail be swirly, but also heavy. And just open into those higher ribs. You're just grass in a field waving. That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful.
And then coming back down, let your hands land on your head, wipe down your face and torso, and just fall back forward. Fall back forward. And we'll just come forward in alignment. Not right away, sorry, that was a bit quick on my part. But in a couple of breaths, we're just going to lie on our bellies. Just to close the class. So when you're ready, just going to lie forward. Now, turn your head one way or the other. Have at least one arm forward. If at least one shoulder can cope. Just slightly bent and easy. Yeah. And then let yourself rest through your body onto the front. Just, yeah. And rest onto the side of that face and the side of that neck with whatever support you have. But just check that once again you're not bracing at the arms. You're not holding yourself up. Let go through. Let the vertebrae of the upper spine, the thoracic spine, just let them sink through, as it were. Yeah, let that happen. Let the breastbone ease onto the ground in its own weight. Let the heart, and the last time we talked about this kind of casing and passageway and support system around the heart, where there's the space between heart and lungs. And instead of thinking of the heart as an object, we can think of all these subject spaces, these densities against less densities. Yeah. As if we've forgotten that we have a container which has content in it. Content. And the visceral river is an extraordinary content. It's part of the river of how we get excited and tired. It's part of the river of how we have emotional movements. It's part of this thing, this other brain that knows so much, but we don't listen to, the enteric brain. We're just resting the bony back on this intelligent, muddy riverbank. And of course, when you lie on your front and you soften, you're making a back bend. You're making a back bend. And that's how we'll end the class. You're welcome to hang out there. In about 12 minutes, or I went over by a few minutes, so in about 12 minutes or so, at 6 o'clock French time, we will meditate here. So if you meditate at home, we'll be meditating together. And we'll email you, or you'll get a mailing through the meditation community. But there won't be a class next week or the following week. We'll pick up after that. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone, for your donations. So that's very helpful, even a very small one. It's so lovely. And also for your comments, have been very helpful. Lots of love. Bye-bye. Thank you, you guys, Katrina, John, and Luke.
Thank you.
Bye.